Hi guys, and welcome to another Devcast. Today it will be something completely different. Today I'm introducing a new framework or a system. It's called the Dash animation system, and it is animation system for Unity. So what's the thinking behind the system? We in our company need a better way to animate UIs, mostly UIs. You can animate anything with this, but mostly UIs are something that we iterate a lot on, and we needed something simpler for non-technical people to work with. So it's a visual-based system, a node-based system that should enable you to create uh, programmatic as well as statically altered timeline animations and combine them together. So instead of like writing tweens, you just create these nodes that animate your UI, and you can also create nodes that take a statically altered animation from timeline and animate the same UI. You can even combine it, and it also extends the possibility for the statically altered animations where you can like retarget the timeline animations or play them in reverse or with a different time and so on. It's something I've been working on basically day and night for quite some time. So it was in alpha till now, and now this is the beta release. I want to stress it out that this is a beta release, so in the next couple of months it will be in this beta mode, which means that there may be breaking changes and there will be less support for backwards compatibility. So a new beta release can like break your assets because you are creating assets. So just keep that in mind. I will try to solve the back compatibility, but there is a no like a high priority on that. So the API may change, and uh, that's why I would like prefer you to create simple stuff. You can experiment with the really complex stuff, but don't do like production ready complex graphs because it may break down. That's the point of this beta period, to like solve the hard stuff, solve the serialization and so on. So it's really strong before we are releasing it into the final, which should be like second quarter of this year. Um, I decided to make this framework or this system free because and open to anyone, because we'd like to share our tools, and secondly because it was successful with my other frameworks, and I would like to hear any feedback you guys have. I mean, I'm going to prioritize the internal needs, but any feedback is welcome. And for example, when I got feedback from you guys for Genome 2D, and I implemented it, it was great even for us. So the more people try and play with this system, the more feedback I get, and the less bugs are there, and we can kind of grow this thing a bit bigger and more stable. So let's start. You can find the Dash animation system on GitHub, the public repository. It was the initial release, as you can see, for the beta. There is a bit of help already, which breaks down the building blocks of this system. Uh, in later stages, there will be video and tutorial for each part, and for each node type even. But at the moment, during the beta period, I want just a couple of videos, so I don't need to like redo them all the time. So there will be this video and maybe one more or two more. So there are some prerequisites like Unity 2019.4, which is the latest long-term support version, and we are working on it. So that was the main target. It may work in a previous version because there is not that much different, and it definitely works in the later versions as well because I started it on the 2020 and then backported it to 2019. And then there is a prerequisite for the .NET 4 version, which is basically a must these days, and it may even some of the third-party libraries that I used need them, like the Odin serializer, which is basically the best serializer out there. And I'm very thankful for the Cyrenix guys that they made it open source and free for us to use, because I used many different serializers, not just in Unity, but in other frameworks and other languages, and Odin is one of the best I've encountered. So I used it for serialization. For the programmatic tweens, I used Dotween. Not that uh, uh, I would need to. I have my own tween library, or there are other tween libraries, but it was a decision based on how popular the tweening library is. So I'm basically, as far as I know, the 90% of people that are tweening anything or animating anything programmatically in Unity are using .tween because it is really good framework, and it's now by now it's an industry standard, and it's free. The basic version, the standard version I'm using is free, so just feel free and download it. It's part of the project already, same as the Odin. And finally, the I'm using NCalc, which is an expression library for expression evaluation for C Sharp. And it's free as well. You can find it at the GitHub. You don't need to download it. It's part of the repository. But if you, for example, want to update or check it out, definitely check it out. And I want to stress out once again that this is a beta period, so uh, be aware of that. If you want to contact me and you have any feedback, you can use my email, obviously, but you can use also a Twitter. And then there is a Trello for this, where you can see what I'm working on at the moment on the Dash system, what will be in the upcoming version. This is already done. I merged it into this version. And for example, if you have any kind of feature in mind or any kind of bug you are encountering, and you check this and it's not here, it's not mentioned here, just write up to me, and I will definitely at least write it down so I know about that. It doesn't mean that every feature will be automatically implemented. There are some few labels, as you can see, what I'm working on and stuff like that. I want to stress these two, the fish list and experimental label. Wish list is something that I'm thinking about, something that's not crucial, but it would be like nice to have, and needs maybe a bit more exploring. Experimental stuff is that's really something that I would really like to have, but it's not really easy to implement, or uh, it's possible to implement only by changing some other stuff, or by modifying some other stuff. For everybody that worked on like editor extensions in Unity, uh, every one of us knows that it's really kind of hard and jumping through the loops to sometimes to work with the extension stuff. So that's why some of the stuff is experimental. If it works, it works. If not, it may be removed from the framework. We'll see how it works and how Unity updates maybe in this regard. So let's start with the example. I've created this very small example to just show the system, the basics of the system. Uh, I want to say that even though this scene is part of the repository, this graphics is not, because it's a paid graphics. It's from Asset Store, from Unity, so it's not part of the repository, and you will not see it, even though there will be this like hierarchy, but you will not see the graphics. I will change this if I have some free time. It's not priority at the moment, but I will try to change it to public domain graphics, or to some of mine At the moment, I just need this to show the basics of the system. It's a similar, very simple hierarchy of buttons, and so let's start. The main one of the main parts of the system is dash. You can already see it, but it's dash controller, which is a component, is a mono behavior that basically controls the underlying graph that will be doing the execution of the animation, and that's how you basically communicate with the system inside your project. So it's empty. We can see that there is no graph. We can either like assign a graph. I don't have any, or we can create it. So let's create one. If you want to create a graph, it will ask you if you want an instance or an asset. You maybe saw something like this already in other frameworks. The idea behind this is very simple. If you want the graph just for this instance, for this screen or this menu, you just create an instance asset, and it will be serialized on the controller, on the component. It will not be a separate asset in the project. If you want something that it's maybe more reusable, so, you can create an asset graph, and it will be inside your project as a scriptable object, and you can even send it to other projects and reuse it. There are some differences how to approach creating asset graphs and versus instance graphs, and we will talk about later. So let's create a instance graph. It's changed. We'll see some different buttons. We can save it to assets, so basically make it an asset graph. If you have an asset graph, you can bind it to the instance and make it an instance graph, so we can switch between these two types. We can delete it, and there is this property called auto start, but it means that it will automatically start the graph once the dash controller awakes inside Unity. So it will automatically run the stuff in it. It communicates with the graph through an enter node that I will show you, and it will automatically run it. So let's open the editor. This is the main part of the system where you edit the graphs. So let's talk a bit about it. You will see a title which will just tell you which graph you are editing. All the bound graphs at the moment have bound name. I will probably change it to something like bound and the controller name, which is screen. So it's a bit more readable. There is the version of the system at the moment, which controller is bound, or which controller you are editing on, because you can even edit an asset graph on a controller and you will see which controller you are editing on. It's very useful for previewing, because you cannot preview if you are not on any controller, because you cannot animate anything if you are just editing a scriptable object that's not referencing anything. So it's experimental, because it's kind of doing hacky stuff to preview tweens and stuff inside editor without going to the play mode. You can obviously use play mode to preview your graphs, but this is previewing your graphs without entering play mode. And you have a file menu, just import export JSON. I'm using this to validate the serialization and to check it out. It's not really, it shouldn't be used to edit or to import export stuff, but you can use it, but it's mainly for me to check the serialization at the moment. And there are some preferences, some useful ones to clean up, because at the moment during the alpha and beta there was some issue that, for example, one node breaks, its serialization breaks, it's a null reference, and the whole graph breaks. So I have utility methods like cleanup null that just cleans all the null nodes inside the graph and stuff like that. At the moment, the latest feature I added was validate serialization. It will try to fix the serialization instead of like cleaning it. It's, for example, when you have a parameterized properties and you change a type, it will break down the serialization, but we can try to recreate uh, the instance by using default values of the value objects. And then you have like show experimental nodes, show variables, and maybe we will return to those in a minute. So let's start. We are already 15 minutes in. Let's start. As I said, we have nodes that are part of the graph. So let's create a node. You have a few categories at the moment. There will be more, definitely. There will be more even node types, definitely. But at the moment, these are what's there. These animation nodes are nodes that work with time and probably animate something, even though the delay doesn't animate, but it works with time. Events are the inputs and outputs from the graph. Logic is most of the basic logic, like adding variables, debugging, for loops, and stuff like that. Retargeting is the main thing inside the graph I will talk about soon. And then there is a spawn, which destroys or creates instances of other objects, for example spawning items in the canvas. So let's start with the enter node. As I said, if we're using auto start, it will automatically call the enter node. Sorry, my mic just got dropped. I have this stupid mic that always turns off. So there you can only have one enter node. If you want to create it, another one wouldn't be there already. So let's just start. It will automatically go here, and this is the point I want to talk about retargeting, because everything happens on a target inside the dash animation system. Because if we want to animate anything, we want to target something to animate, because it needs the game object to animate. So by default, when you enter a graph by, for example, using this auto start, it will enter it and send what's called a node flow data instance with attributes. You can have any attributes. You can send your own attributes if you want to, but there are some reserved attributes, and one of them is the target attribute. So it will automatically send a node flow data instance inside enter with one attribute called target, which will be set to this game object, which is the game object that dash controller is on. So it will have a single attribute target with this game object, so we can automatically, all the nodes will target that game object. So if you call animate scale, it will animate scale on this game object. So let's start some animation. Anchored position. We can connect it. So this would try to animate the screen. So here are some few properties. As you can see, if you select any node, if you select like multiple nodes, there will be no properties. But if you select just one node, you will see the properties of that node. By default, Inter doesn't have any properties unless we also count these advanced, which are common properties for all the nodes, but they are outside the scope of this tutorial. So here are the properties. As you can see, simple animation properties like time, delay, easing, from position to position, if it's relative. And then there is this retargeting group. All animation nodes will have what I call local retargeting. It means you can retarget that attribute that's inside the node flow data. It will be the input attribute, but you can retarget, and you will only retarget it for this node. So for example, if we had another node after that, it would still have target screen unless we use a special node to retarget it inside the node flow data. This means this is useful, for example, if you have like this screen and you want to, in this node you want to target this button, and in second node for example in the later node you want to target this button. You don't always want to like retarget the attribute inside the flow data, but just for this animation, for this single animation, you just want locally retarget it. So just change it. We have two types of retargeting. One is using reference, and the second one is using string or path. Both of them have their like pros and cons. By using reference, we can just basically drag it there. You can also see any information here that you are using reference. It will be blue if you are using script, and I can use. If you are using string, it will be just white without brackets. So it's really a visual feedback for you which type of retargeting you are using directly on the graph. Using references have their pros, like if you just rename this content, it will automatically work. But the cons are that it is a strong reference. So, for example, if we had an asset graph, it would basically not be reusable because it would still try to target the single reference for the content that we just specified. So it would be useful only for this screen, which is on instance graph. It's perfectly fine because as well references are serialized with the controller, not with the asset graph. So even if you are using reference inside an asset graph, they are serialized on the controller, and it depends how they resolving depends on what controller the asset graph is. But this is a bit more advanced topic. I'm just saying that if you want to reuse a graph on multiple like objects, I would prefer using string references or path references. So, and I'm looking for a game object named content, and at the moment I'm using the whole hierarchy. So I will check that I just want to check for the child hierarchy, and it will basically find the first game object with that name inside the hierarchy. You can even use a path, so just to specify something deeper. And this the con is obvious that if you rename the content, it will stop working. But the pros are higher, and it means that if you have the same hierarchy on multiple objects or prefabs or anything, it will work on all of them. So let's just try this for a bit of smaller time. Let's go to Outback, easing. We will try relative position. So we will basically set it somewhere here and then tween it here. Let's try this inside editor preview, and it works. We can now animate this title. Okay. Outback. Using from relative. Again, we are going to retarget. I can show you retargeting by the reference as well, and it works. Okay, Unity is obviously inverted. I always forget about that. The y-axis. So it works. If I just added a delay here, like it should come later, the problem will be quite obvious because this is the default state. If I'm just waiting for this animation, it will wait in the default state. So what I need to do at the moment is just set it to this value outside. So I don't really need to use this at then. And I'm going to 0 time. 0 time means it will skip the twinning. It will directly set the value. So it's synchronous. Okay, what happened? Oh, we don't want to use from. Okay, what's minus is to relative. Okay, I will deactivate this. Position. Oh, we didn't retarget. So it was trying to animate the screen. We just cannot be animated, obviously, because it's driven by the canvas scaler and stuff like that. So we forgot to the retargeting. Now it works. Now we can activate this connection. Deactivation and activation connection just means that it will be there, the connection, and it will not be active. It's way better than deleting them because you see that the connection is there. You can activate it. So now it works. I'm thinking about doing something special on these animate nodes, like initialize from position before delay. which could help in these local use cases where you wouldn't need to use two nodes. So let me know what you think about that. I'm definitely thinking about it. So okay, now we have animated really simple intro animation, and we want to animate the children. We don't really want to animate them separately and create a graph for each child, because that's kind of stupid and pointless. And secondly, if we just added or removed child, we would need to modify the graph. So what we can do is use a special node called retarget to children, and it executes on each child. So it will basically execute 4 times, and then five time it will execute on finish. Like if you want to do some animation after all the children were animated instead of per child animation, you will just drag it into on finished. So what we are doing, we want the children to animate after this animation, but again there is this problem with the from position, because they are already here. So in this animation they will be on this position. So here we will just basically send them to out of the screen in 0 time, just to initialize them to their like initial state that we want. So we will send them out. We don't really need to retarget here, because we will get the target inside the attribute here. This will already set the attribute dimension target to the child. But we do need to retarget here, because if we just called this on a current target, which is basically the controller, the screen, it would return the content and the title, and we want to animate the buttons. So we need to target this and its children. So we can retarget, and we will target the content buttons. The path here is getting shortened out just to avoid uh, a lot of characters, a lot of text, but it's here. So now it should basically hide the buttons, which it works. And now we can use the node once again, but now we will animate. So again, we want to retarget to content buttons. I will use child. I always use child, because if there was other content buttons inside the hierarchy, it would find that one. So now we can just animate each child. Again, we are not retargeting, because we already have the target from here, and we don't need the from position because we already set it somewhere. And now we want to go to relatively 180 from our from position. So, and as usual, I'm use outback. So now it works, but all the children animate together, which is not something that we want. If we use delay here, it doesn't matter, because all of the children are basically now executing synchronously. So all of them would have the same delay at the same time, so they will just all wait. So this node has some properties that we can use, and there are two of them. One of them is the child delay, which is basically a delay increment after each child execution. So first one will be in 0 time, second one will be in this delay basically, third one will be at twice this delay, and so on. And finally, we can even delay the finished execution if we used it. So let's say we want this delay per child, and as you can see, it already works. And we can even just, if we want to, like reverse the iteration of the children. So now we can for example animate the scale of the text if we want to. Let's do it here. So it will animate with the position as well together, because if we edit it here, it will just wait for the position and then animate it. If we want the animations to run concurrently, we just do it like this. So let's do it. Okay, we want to retarget here because we don't want to scale. Okay, we just want to scale the text. We could scale the button as well, but let's try the text. So we will do the child, and we already have a target. The button here is the target. So we want to target its child, not from the screen because we already retargeted here. Okay, and we want to use from, not relative global. So let's try, and as you can see, it animates. Okay, let's do for example animation for the title. And what I want to do is a special, which is animate text. Sorry for the distraction. Oh, animate text at the moment is experimental, but I will show it. Just to something that I'm working on, we will use the animation of like here and retarget it to the text we want. It will basically animate the text of the TextMesh Pro instance. I'm not using a Pro version of DotTween, so I have my own utilities for animating the vertex buffer on the TextMesh Pro. At the moment, this is the only effect, but once you have the logic behind it, we can create any effects basically. That's why this node is experimental at the moment. And when manipulating vertex buffers, it's kind of slow inside editor mode without play mode, so it's way better to preview it inside play mode. We can, as I said, you can use these preview controls, or you can basically preview it inside play mode as well. And as you can see, the visual feedback you get works in play mode as well, not just inside here. It means the blue ones is which are just currently executing. Each node has at least some time for execution, at least visually, even though, for example, this executes in 0 time, but visually you will see it for some time, just to give you that feedback that it was executing. Okay, that's the summary and intro for the Dash animation system. I want to touch lightly on some advanced topic that I may talk about and that are there. One of them is the graph variables, where you can have a variable that you can reference inside the nodes. So for example, we wanted like the resolution here. So each of these could be could reference just this resolution. So each node, each property that can be parameterized has this icon. There will be more nodes, parameterized nodes. I will just change it as we go. But at the moment there are some that I already thought would be great to have parameterized. So if we click this, we can switch between parameterized mode and direct value mode. So in parameterized mode, you need to write expression. It can be any expression, that's another complex topic, but the simple expression is to just reference to this variable, let's call it screen, and to reference a graph variable at the moment, we need to use g underscore. Because if you didn't use g underscore, it would try to reference an attribute inside the node flow data I mentioned. You can send your own attributes inside the flow data from external like impulses, and it would try to reference it at the moment. So the graph variables are with g underscore. So if we run it, it will behave the same because just evaluates the expression to this value. So if we, for example, like changed it to here, so it wouldn't it wouldn't obviously animate to 9080 because it's referencing to this value. And there are functions even you can use here, even equations and stuff like that. It's advanced topic, but there is basically an evaluator that tries to evaluate the expression and then use the value that comes out from the expression. Another thing here, which is really nice, is you can bind this variable to an property that's basically outside of the controller. For it can be any component, your custom component on the game object. It tries to evaluate to the same type, to the same generics. So at the moment, for example, we can use the reference resolution of this canvas scaler if we wanted to, and it will automatically bind to that. It will tell you. Now if you run it, it will go like crazy because we have a Y as well inside the reference resolution. So we would need to, and we wanted just the horizontal animation. So it's not really a good idea to bind it there, but you get the grasp on that, and you can have multiple variables as well. So that's it. I will touch on these topics and how to utilize them. For example, like referencing and sending stuff inside the Nodeflow data. I will also utilize the events, so you can, for example, have this enter for the intro animation and then a different event for the out animation, and you can basically tell the graph, okay, now call the out and do the out animation part of the graph. You don't need to have a separate graph for out animation because you can have custom event and different part. The graph is not really connected as a whole. You can have multiple parts inside the big graph. There we'll talk about the expressions and basically anything you also want to talk about. So I'm looking for the feedback. Uh, I currently work on another framework called Machina, which is a framework I'm working on for quite some time, and it's for procedural generation, and it uses similar logic, and a lot of the stuff I basically migrate from there here. So there is a great synergy between these two frameworks, and I use some parts from this one and migrate it. Then I will to try to keep the common base common. But some of the things that I did for Machina are really great here. For example, the expressive evaluation optimization, because here if I run this graph, it 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 can call the expressions like maybe 2 times per frame, not even though, because it's not per frame, it's just calls the expression and then animates it and then calls it again. So the expression calls are really like very few. In Machina there can be because Machina is synchronous. When you call that you want the procedural object, it will automatically evaluate the graph in a synchronous way in a single frame, and there are millions of times per frame that where the expression evaluation gets called, sometimes even tens of millions, because it can get called on a vertex, and it's highly optimized. So don't worry if you have these expressions inside your graphs that it will just be slow at the moment. If you encounter any performance issues or any issues, basically, just let me know. And I hope uh, it was good at explaining it what I wanted to explain, and I'm looking forward to your feedback.